less than 30. Good evening. I'm Mark Harris. Welcome to DiversiTV, Season 3. Tonight we'll be talking about a Latina perspective. But if you're new to the show, welcome. And if you're a devoted watcher, as I know there are some, welcome back. If we go to slide, DiversiTV's mission is to illuminate everyday diversity issues and give the mic and the camera to those who don't always get it. Now, since the show started, I've been appointed to Interim Chief Diversity Officer of Lane Community College, so our definition of diversity has always gone beyond what the legal definition of protected class, that is initially minorities and ethnic minorities and women, to a broader definition of diversity, which is reflected in who we have in terms of schedule. So we always start off with Native because being a black Indian, that's the way I like to roll. We acknowledge with the first folks because we are on Native ground at all times. Remember that. Then we start with then we go with an Anglo perspective. African Americans in Eugene, we did that last week. This week, Latino, Latina. Next week, we'll be doing Asian. February 20th, GLBTQS, which stands for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, queer, questioning, two-spirit, and a shout-out to all you couples that got your domestic partnerships notarized, etc. Much props. Well done. Good struggle. Not that it's over by any means. February 27th, disability. March 5th, youth perspective. March 12th, class. And ending this season, spirituality and religion. Our guest tonight is Beatrice B.B. Head. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Beatrice and I go back a ways in this community. In terms of not only most of the work that I've done professionally in the state has been alcohol and drug related, but working with youth. And you've been in the juvenile justice system forever.
27 years.
27
Retired last
years.
year. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So where are you from?
Originally from La Ciudad de la Reina Nuestra Señora de Los Ángeles, also known as LA, California.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yes. That's
City of Angels.
City of Angels, right. And probably the multicultural model, being from there, you know, just remembering that the founding fathers of the founding fathers, basically 44, well, actually there were only, out of the 44 so-called founding fathers, like only 3 of them were white. And nobody was passing laws to get rid of the white folks. Fancy that.
Wow. Wonder what was up with that.
Hey?
Did they have those kind of laws?
No, they didn't have those kind of laws, and actually slaves were freed. So how long have you lived in Eugene, and what prompted your move here?
Well, I came to Eugene in 1979 and basically came for cleaner air, a better environment to raise my children, who were youngsters then, just entering kindergarten and 2nd grade, I think it was. So.
Good, so not even long enough to be corrupted by LA Unified.
Well, you know, I lived in Eugene now longer than I lived in Los Angeles, so this
but
is
you
home.
didn't come in on the wagon train, so...
No, I didn't.
Yeah, we actually, Greg and I made reference to that because some of the ideas about, well, even with black folks about, you know, well, you're newcomers, and, you know, it's like, well, wait a minute, what's up with that? Because, you know, even white people say, well, you're a transplant, like, okay, you're a native Oregonian if you came in on the wagon trains like 5, 6 generations ago or something. Like,
Well, my mother was born in Sonora, Mexico, and my father was born in Arizona, in 1910 when it was still a territory of the United States before it became a state.
Okay.
So, but when, growing up in Los Angeles, I had a lot of folks every now and then go, what are all these Mexicans doing here? And it was kind of like, do you know what city you're in?
Yeah.
The city of Our Lady, Queen of the Angels.
Like,
Not LA, but Los Angeles, and the whole big name that goes with it. Yeah.
right.
That was our people's.
And, the interesting thing, of course, when you look at the history from like an Oregonian perspective, is like, wait a minute. Mexico ended 10 miles south of Ashland.
Yeah.
Okay, so who's the illegal immigrant
Arizona,
pilgrim? Yeah,
Colorado,
California.
Nuevo Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah, those weren't part of the U.S. yet.
Right, and so, we could actually talk a little bit about the history about how, they didn't willingly become part of the United States. They were, from a certain perspective, stolen.
Right, right.
Definitely stolen. So, and not for the principles of freedom, but actually to replicate slavery. Definitely in the case of Texas, and remember the Alamo and all that kind of stuff. It was about, a black Indian president, Vicente Guerrero, made slavery illegal throughout all Mexico, which includes the territories that you just named, all the Spanish named states. So, black people were actually escaping from the South into Mexico because
there was more freedom.
It was more freedom, right? And that actually continued even when they became parts of the United States, leaving Texas to come to Mexico in the 20s.
Right.
For that very reason. I mean, there is given the battle that we had to change Centennial to Martin Luther King Boulevard.
Sí se puede.
Yeah, right?
Yes,
and the battle that we also had to name not so much a street, I mean, though there was a battle in Portland about that, but to name a school after Caesar. Right. Right? There's a Martin Luther King Elementary School in Mexico. A lot of people don't know that.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Awesome. I knew there were a lot all over the country, but I didn't know that.
But in Mexico, so in a place where a lot of black people escaped the United States, before slavery and after slavery in the 20th century, to escape racism, they would come to Mexico. So despite, the whole 187 thing in California, there are some of us that remember that common history that we share. So your work in the juvenile justice system, how long were you involved with that?
Well, I started, like I say, in 1979 working in detention, and I did that for a year as an on-call and then got hired as a regular detention group worker and started going to school at the U of O and worked and went to school at the same time. And eventually, during the big layoffs, I was laid off for a couple months and then went back as an on-call and intake, which is where kids first get brought in when they're arrested. And I continued to go to school and then got hired as a full-time intake worker. Yeah. So I think I've done that since, I think it was 86 or 85, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Okay. So, about the same time I was doing alcohol and drug work in Churchill. And that's where I started becoming aware of, some of the, shall we say, trends, conditions that ended up getting a label DMC. Disproportionate minority. Well, let's see, it used to be confinement. Right. But then they realized, it's more than just confinement. It's contact, too, which could lead to confinement. Right.
I think that was during the time when folks were becoming aware that there was an overrepresentation of minority youth, particularly African-American youth, in lockup facilities like McLaren, and that then we saw it, that they were also being stopped by police more often, but that came later.
That awareness, even though it was continuing. So may one assume that you were one of the only or few bilingual workers in the justice system?
When I started in detention, I was the only Spanish speaker, and there weren't that many kids coming into the system in the very beginning when I first got there, so I wasn't that aware of the fact that I was the only one. And then as we started seeing an influx of minority youth, just like we saw an influx of minority monolingual Spanish speakers moving to this area and other people of color, we began to see more Asian, more African Americans, and folks stand out here. I mean, you know, it's a pretty white community, and things were changing. So then it was reflected in the need for somebody to be able to communicate with those people.
Okay, but
Us.
your hiring actually, you know, and I have to comment on, you know, being the diversity officer, you know, at Lane. I didn't get hired because I was black. That was an accident for them, a lucky accident for them. They didn't start to, I would imagine they didn't start to hire you simply because you're bilingual. That was an accident for them too.
That was an accident, a lucky accident, sure.
Did you find any difficulty in them accepting that and even valuing that capability?
Well, I mean, I think that folks did value it. People came to me, can you interpret this? Can you help us write something for a court document? There were a lot of folks coming to ask for some help. And at the time, I didn't recognize the need that we had for me to be able to say, well, that's not what I get paid to do.
Yeah.
I'm paid to do this, and we need to have payment. So I did it.
Yeah.
You know, I did it as much as I could. I'm not as functionally literate in writing and reading as I am in English, although I do, you know, I can read everything, but I don't write as well. So, but I did the best I could under the circumstances, sure.
Because I know that, well, that would, for us at Lane, that was a struggle, actually getting people to be compensated for that.
Right.
Because they were often, oh, well, you speak Spanish, can you help with this, that, or the other, usually unpaid, and then, well, wait a minute, you know, the precedent is that for an extra skill that you don't have, that you're meeting these needs, that these people are paying you for a service, I should be compensated for this. This is the protocol at the UN.
Right.
So,
well, I had heard that in Salem, I had a friend whose daughter got hired on in Salem, John Glassburner's daughter, in fact, and she had shared with me a copy of her business card, and it was bilingual because she's bilingual. And I thought, wow, what a great idea. So I went to the folks at my work and said, can I get you know, a dual card, one side in English, one side in Spanish? Makes sense. They said sure. And then I heard about there's a compensation. I can't remember what it was. It's pretty minimal for bilingual services, but can we do that? And so then there was some finagling, and eventually we had a position that could offer a bilingual compensation for one position.
okay. Was it yours?
No, well, it was offered to me.
Okay.
And at the time, we had another woman who had finally gotten hired on as a probation counselor who was bilingual, Carmen Gilman, Michael Mother, a good friend, vice principal at Springfield High. And as somebody who was new coming in, and she had 3 children, and mine were grown, I thought, well, she should have it. And so I said, you know, give it to that position. And so for the few years that she was there, she was given the bilingual differential.
Okay. When was that about?
Oh gosh, I think she's been at Springfield now for going on her 4th year.
Yeah.
So, or
After
3rd
that.
year, or maybe completing her 3rd year. So she was there for, so she got it for those few years that she was at the department.
Okay. So let's see. How do you, so when you think about the experience of youth and families with the justice system and also in this community, which may or may not be welcoming depending on a number of things, what do you reflect on that experience?
Oh gosh. Thinking about back in the day when the research was coming out about the overrepresentation, and our department made a commitment under our director then, Stephen Carmichael, to form, I think we were called the Multicultural Committee, and we began looking at what sorts of things we could do to create a more open environment. And I mean, we looked at things as basic as, how about some art? We had a committee that looked at, we had a big Brown versus Brown Board of Education poster. We got some Diego Rivera. We had some Native American. I mean, you know, we tried to, even in when you walked in, and if you look at the new building, there's some artwork that was that's clearly multicultural with an intention to help people to see themselves represented, which for most of us, that makes us feel more welcoming.
Yeah.
And so I think
even though it's kiddie jail.
Even though it's kiddie jail, I
Yeah.
mean, I think that when you walk in, having that piece, having signs in Spanish, I think there was a nice job done of having signs indicating, you know, el baño and recepción, things like that, so that people would know you're at the intake and this way and that sort of thing. So those efforts were made. I think the place where there's always room for improvement is for people to see folks who can speak their language. Particularly, I mean, you know, people say, well, then you think someone should be there who can speak French and German, and you know, we haven't had, in the time that I was there, we never had a French kid taken into custody or a monolingual French speaker. But we, you know, I think that when we have this many Latino youth living in this community, there should at least be a proportionate number of staff on hand to work with those youth, and unfortunately we've never caught up. Whenever there's a budget cut or people are looking at stuff, I don't think that always comes to the forefront. I mean, we have bumper stickers that say diversity is our strength, you know, but whether or not we really implement that in our day-to-day stuff, I think needs a lot of discussion.
It becomes, well,
a lot
even,
of discussion,
you know,
and action.
and action.
Because we've discussed a lot.
Discussed a lot to the point of being disgusting, or some of us being disgusted. But you know, to some folks' credit, you know, they did come. I don't want to. I was almost about to say have a come to Jesus revelation, but you know, they did, you know, come around to that, you know, to their credit, even though. Sometimes they had to get drag kicking and screaming. I mean, the issue about, you know, proportionality, you know, and proactive proportionality. Look, these folks are here. You know, okay, do you want to go about the illegal thing? Time out, first of all. You know, from our perspective, what we've been talking about, you know, with your reference to the actual name of the city, okay? These people were welcome here before your language had an alphabet. So let's look at that. Okay? If you want to talk about illegal immigration, okay, there are, and you know, I guess I've been actually chomping at the bit to even talk about this statistic because you mentioned French. Right? So there's 500,000 in that number that's always bandied about, 12 million illegal. Well, wait a minute. Part of that number is 500,000 white people.
From Canada?
Canada, Russia,
Sure.
Europe, yeah.
Who stayed? Yeah.
Okay, who stay? You know, they're here illegally, right? And they ain't doing farm work. They ain't washing dishes.
No.
Okay? So they're taking jobs a little bit higher on the economic totem pole hierarchy, all right? And they're here illegally. So nobody's running, there's no ICE posses, you know, on the Canadian border, you know, just that little caveat there. But let's look at also the diversity of language, and maybe we'll have that as a DiversiTV issue at some point. But as an example, in my new hat as Chief Diversity Officer, I've had conversations with the city of Eugene. So, for example, our friend Jason Mack told me that, okay, we could use bilingual EMTs right now. We can hire them right now. I said, okay, so what language is? You know, just on the off chance it might be more than Spanish. And I was right, without prior knowledge. So he said, well, Spanish, of course, but Korean and Russian. I go, Russian? Yeah. Well, I would have thought Woodburn, for
Right.
sure, right? But
Sure.
no, here too. Yeah, well, yeah, there is that Russian Orthodox church in Whitaker, which means that there's a population
Right,
to
there's a
support it.
community.
Okay, Hynix, Korean, and other, the jail, the restaurant, not the place.
Right,
There is evidence that there is a growing Korean population here, and yeah, we need EMTs that are bilingual in those languages that we could actually put to work now. And part of my job is to look at, okay, let's bring that capability in to train our EMTs, but trying to be proactive with that. All this to say, when we started looking at this issue, and I've had an interesting relationship with DYS over the years, and I think that just when I talk with you and a few of our other friends that have been there are still working there, and they referenced the report, so I dug it up, right? And because it kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of got the ball rolling.
Right. Yeah, it got the bees buzzing.
The
People
bees
started
buzzing.
talking,
Yeah.
and they were
Yeah.
wondering, what's this all about? And
Yeah.
there was a defensive posture on the part of a lot of folks in the very
Way
beginning. Like, if it
defensive.
hadn't been for this report, everything would have been hunky-dory at the department and everybody was getting along. And what the report basically said was that people of color didn't feel as comfortable as the Anglos who worked there, the minority or the majority group, and that there were some perceived differences. And I think we find that a lot in
everywhere, Yeah.
that folks' experiences of what's happening right now with the elections. Talk to folks
Isn't
who are
that a trip?
exciting,
Yeah.
and revolutionary. So I think that it did begin a lot of discussion, and it also began an awareness. It raised awareness, got people talking about it, and people started strategizing. We started strategizing, and I was really proud for a long time of the direction that the department was going, because we were having that active group that was looking at the changes that needed to happen, making recommendations. Some of those recommendations were filtering out things like, well, if we're going to try to hire a more diverse staff, let's ask some questions about people's diversity experiences. What does diversity mean to them? What have they done out in the world that would help them to work better with a diverse population of kids and families that we serve? And so that was one piece, adding a question about diversity to hiring questionnaires. And so the art, the questions, there were things that were happening to increase that awareness. And at that time also we developed a multicultural advocate position to help keep kids out of the system in the first place.
Right.
And that's where I think Lupe Quinn was our first.
Well, actually, I was the first.
You were first,
Yeah.
right? Okay, you
Yeah.
were before Lupe.
Yeah.
Okay, and but she was right in there. Janice Olalde.
Yeah.
We had some really.
And Maria. And,
and Maria's still there.
Yeah.
Maria Thomas.
Yeah. I think looking at that as a sort of like a case study, because I could talk about Lane, and sometimes we don't really. Obviously, we don't have to name names or things like that, but the experiences are often common with major employers, like the county, like Lane, like the U of O, et cetera, et cetera. And how I first started looking at it, basically working alcohol and drug, is I just make diagnostic criteria, and we had talked about this, with me and Greg about the whole issue of cultural competency, which is actually a construct that was developed by some people of color, for example, like Terry Cross, who's Native American, to deal with disproportionality and injustice with dealing with Indian children, like having them taken from Indian homes and placed, in Anglo homes, and they lose their language,
culture.
lose their culture, you lose all that kind of stuff, lose the stuff that protects them from substance abuse, among other things, right? And being able to have that conversation. So I would, use diagnostic criteria to refer kids to treatment. And usually it would be often, especially when we looked at the whole disproportionate minority piece, car full of white kids, one black kid, they all get MIPs or whatever, or, unlawful use of controlled substance, whatever that that term is. The white kids get treatment, black kids get jail.
That's right.
Okay,
That
and no treatment, right? And so I would be making the referrals to Sharp, and Sharp wouldn't take the black kid. Oh, no insurance, or refer them to DePaul. Oh, we discharged him because he was non-compliant. Well, what do you mean non-compliant? He's detoxing from crack. What kind of compliance do you want from a 17-year-old? Who's saying that this skinhead's calling me nigger, and this death rocker is casting spells on me. Maybe that's paranoia. Maybe that's the cocaine. What if it's true? Or a combination. What if it's true? I mean, the guy's supposed to be here for a 3-month stay. Why did we send him up on Thursday? He's back on campus on Monday, and you didn't call anybody. And so then what happens? He commits crimes and goes further into the system, right? So multiply that out. So I just thought that was vicarious, and then I had, it was then, I think, Susan, who printed out the data,
Susan
right?
Bennett.
And I said, okay, just let's disaggregate the data by race, and let's just do drug stuff, because I'm looking for a trend here, and so this should be random enough. Lo and behold, all right, white kid gets referral to treatment after the second MIP. White kid got treatment after the first MIP, second MIP. Oh, here's a black girl with 6 drug-related referrals, no referral to treatment. Why is that? Explain that to me. What's the So we go in. So we started this group. Jerry Diller, Ruben Cota, who was then head of Chicano Affairs, which is now Central Latino Americano. Jack Lawson, Native American, does prison work, and me and Guadalupe Quinn. But we studied DYS, CSD, as it was called, Child Protective Service, Looking Glass. So we were called Multicultural Associates, doing this study to set the context for folks at home. So we walk into DYS, and as you said, there was a defensive posture, just like there was fairly defensive postures everywhere. Like, people were questioning my objectivity now.
Well, I think it's hard a lot of times for the dominant culture to look at themselves, and none of us wants to believe that we're doing something inappropriate or wrong. And especially when our intention is good. And I think that folks' intentions were good.
Their intentions were good. I mean, I know
sometimes takes seeing the data before we can go, oh, the numbers aren't lying, or at least not this time, because they can be crunched a certain way. But at that point, they really reflected what was going on. And at that point, I think our department really took a good hard look at itself, and under Steve's leadership, we were willing to, I think he did some things to help bring it together, and championed those causes, and many's a time that I went to his office, do you have a minute? And I know he'd roll his eyes like, here she comes, what's she going to do? And I would bend his ear for, a half hour, an hour about, my view of what was going on. And sometimes it was helpful, and sometimes he'd come back later and say, I didn't like what you said, but some of what you said, is beginning to make some sense.
Because, one reason that, we were at First Friday here, and so your name came up, right? And, I said, okay, next week's Latino, who of y'all wants to do TV? Well, let Bibi do it, because,
She's retired.
She's retired, because some of us, still on payroll. Well, and, I understand we have a non-disclosure agreement anyway, I don't want to air people's dirty laundry anyway, even though it'll be fun. But because I remember having those conversations with Steve too, and okay, like, what would it take? Me playing golf with you, or what? Would it, be easy to hear that? I said, this was being driven by your data. You brought this to our attention, okay? And I said, I wasn't coming in, I wasn't Henry Levert, the attack dog, of the black community. I wasn't doing that.
Thank God for Henry.
Right. I mean, racist this, racist. Look, I didn't even say institutional racism. Explain why this black girl has 6 drug offenses and no treatment, and white kids are consistently getting treatment for the first or second offense. Okay, and is she the only one? No. Everyone, all your black kids haven't gotten treatment. I mean, I was sitting on the board of Pathways. They weren't even tracking ethnicity before I got on the board. Okay, while I was there, no African American kid got successfully treated, and they only got referred 2 or 3 in 5 years.
Whoa, something's wrong.
Okay, so
Maybe that was before we had any folks of color in the community. Hardly, no. But it is a growing. We're a growing group, the folks of color,
Right.
and some of the people of color are folks who don't speak English, and particularly Latino, and so we need to have Spanish-speaking folks employed all over Eugene, Springfield, where folks live.
And I really genuinely was trying, coming in, look, I'm trying to help you. Your numbers said this. I didn't point the finger. The data is saying this, okay? So, I'm coming from Northwest Labs. My approach is the science. And, we didn't pull the procedures that did this. This is industry standard stuff. And the report is actually watered down. It really is.
I'm not surprised.
So, but, one of our colleagues that still works said, this should have actually had the place shut down. I mean, if you really follow the implications. So, I walk into this meeting of, a group of staff. I'm not going to identify the unit, but it's there. Some of them are still there. And they had concerns about my objectivity. So, okay. I'm here to hear your concerns. Tell me what your concerns are. Well, quote, I don't know what this emphasis on culture is all about. I can get a suntan and I'll know more about these kids' culture than they do, from a white person. It's like, I don't know what to say. Just like, okay, do you not understand that this was a comment made by the mayor of Portland like 2 or 3 years before, okay? When the only black staff person in the mayor's office had an alcohol problem, self-admitted, checked himself into Serenity Lane, and was fired when he got discharged, okay? While a white staff person, okay, with a cocaine problem, known to the police department, continued to work.
Not okay.
Okay, so the black community's response to saying, okay, firing Bogle was, the mayor said, well, I'll get a suntan and be my own representative to the black community. Okay, so is there like a joke book that white people?
Well, I'm not privy to the
Yeah,
joke,
I mean,
but,
okay, so that's how it started, and then somebody else said, because I'm shutting up because I definitely want to jump somebody, but okay, the head of the unit's a friend of mine, so okay, I'm not trying to endanger this. Okay, so I'm not going to react. So somebody else said, well, that aside, I think that they come from a criminal culture. And so what exactly is the criminal culture? Well, it's their ethnicity. Wow, you're like, I mean, that's when we were doing this study, we were really amazed by what people were like saying to us, saying to people of color, like blithely, not even trying to hide the attitudes.
Right.
Like, I mean, if I can out you for a second, okay. So you're walking down the corridor and there's 4 of you. We just finished interviewing you, right? And somebody says, oh, look, there's 3 beautiful women and a Hispanic. Now, mind you, the scene is there are 4 women walking down the corridor, and we're interviewing the people of color all separately. All right? We interviewed the African American staff, the Latino staff, whatever new native staff they were, and the white staff. Standard protocol with doing a study like this. Okay, you're looking for issues with, you need to interview them separately, right? So you were coming down the hall after finishing your interview. They were coming as the white group, and one of them makes a comment like that. So outside, the fact that you're all beautiful women is, beside the point. Like, okay, where is this coming from? Because that, at the time for you, opened up fresh wounds, and we, re-interviewed you for more stuff. And then that's where we got a lot of the material about, as an example, members of ethnic minority staff experience racism from their peers, because that wasn't just, that wasn't just the only incident. There was others, right? So if they're casually doing this with staff during work hours, what are they doing with kids of color?
Right.
If they already think that ethnic kids have a criminal culture and that criminality is equated with their ethnicity, where'd you learn that?
Well, I think that there were some pieces. I think our whole culture at large has come a long way in terms of diversity.
I mean, that's what got the ball rolling.
Sure.
I mean, that's where we're starting from.
Right.
Wow, okay, so, our experience as people of color in largely white organizations is like a lot of stuff rolls off our back, and it's only when we get like a whole 9 yards dumped on us and we have to like dig out that we start the complaint process.
Well, I think that it really helps when you have some other staff to commiserate with, to support, so I think if you're in a monoculture, and in a way it was pretty much, it was a dominant culture, and there was references back in the day when I started about the good old boy network, that they were always white males hiring other white males generally for the positions of power.
Ex-military, ex-cops.
Well, just the fact that it was generally white males, you didn't see other folks, and so it was a big deal when we began to see some women advancing, and that began to change, and we see that in the larger culture of, we haven't had a female president yet, but that's a possibility. We haven't had an African American president yet, but that's another possibility, and it gets that conversation going a lot more, where we're aware that it isn't just a dominant culture, white culture world.
Right.
And I think when your worldview changes, then you're better able to see what needs to happen, and you can lose some of the defensiveness about this isn't an attack on you didn't do this, you didn't do that, because I think we've come a long way. A lot of folks have retired, stuff has changed, but there's other new opportunities, and that's what I'd like to see, is that we continue to look at. There's an expression that's always used, all things being equal. Well, if all things being equal, because for so long we heard about, well, we haven't had any qualified candidates of color or Spanish speakers. Well, I guess that's a great excuse, but when, as a staff person who's worked there, and, I see folks of color apply for certain positions and they don't get it, it's hard for me to look at that and say, wait a minute, all things being equal.
Oh, I thought that was only at Lane. Oh, no.
Oh, no, it happens all over, that that you have folks who I think have a tendency to hire like themselves. And unless we look at that and say, how many folks around me look different than me? I remember being in meetings at the department, and I'd look around the room, and it'd be 1, 2, 3. There's 4 of us, and 2 of us are, Spanish speakers, or one of us is a Spanish speaker, and that sort of reality and what that's like, it's pretty discouraging, because I was trying to do everything for everybody that I could, and I think that you burn people out.
It's really important what you just said. Okay, you're not just working for Spanish speakers or monolingual Spanish speakers. Okay, you're working for everybody.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of a point, you might agree with this or not, and tell me if you don't, okay? The whole cultural competency piece is not reciprocal. You are required to be culturally competent with white people.
Yes.
And be bilingual.
Right.
They are not required to be bilingual at all, or even bicultural.
Right. Well, on that, of being, we started out with cultural sensitivity, right? We became sensitive to something. But when you got a rock in your shoe, you better become aware that there's a rock in your shoe, and then competence is taking the shoe off and dumping the rock out. What would that take? And so I think that we're at the place where we need to look at the rocks in the shoe.
Do you remember your splinter analogy? Because I've used that and I've attributed it to you.
You say that, and I'm just like, go ahead, tell me.
Okay, all right. This is what BB said.
Back in the day.
And back in the day, and I've used it in cultural competency trainings, okay? Cultural sensitivity is you are aware that I have a splinter, okay? And you try not to knock into it and cause me pain, right? You're aware that I have a splinter, okay? So that's sensitivity. And then but you do continue to knock into it, and it does cause me pain, and you're sorry, and yada, 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 okay? But I got this splinter knocking on the door of opportunity, okay? That you have a golden door handle, but you don't hear my knock. You actually have a pass key. Okay, that's where the privilege piece comes in. You actually have a pass key, boop, 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 the door opens for you. I have to knock, and that's where I got the splinter. So either you could, all things being equal.
Yeah, love that expression.
Okay, I should have the pass key too, or the code, or whatever, or the door should open to me as I approach because you're seeing me approach, right? But no, I got a splinter knocking on the door of opportunity. So cultural competency comes in when, one, you sand the door so I don't get splinters.
Or give you the code.
Right?
So you can get it.
But once I'm in the door, you understand that I might have had splinters, and so, one, you design systems so that, okay, the doors are sanded and people can get entry in, but one level of cultural competency is you assume that I have the splinters, because if I've been knocking on these doors, some of the splinters might have festered, some of them might still cause me pain, and sometimes I might not even feel the pain anymore, so that you realize that. I mean, this is your analogy, right? So you realize that, and you're able to give me the skill to remove the splinters and even design systems so I don't get splinters, and you're able to make me aware that I have splinters that I've stopped feeling, right? Yeah. And that's where we needed to get to, because and go beyond cultural sensitivity, because, as a so-called diversity trainer, I mean, there's, when the study came out a few weeks ago that, well, diversity training doesn't work if it's mandatory. Well, yeah, but if your organization realizes, oh, there's an opportunity that we can make some money here, if we basically do outreach and increase our organizational capability to serve this population, we'll be ahead of the game. Then it works really well.
Well, I think the whole cultural competence and diversity education, it doesn't work when it's the little guys at the bottom pushing the rock up the hill.
Right.
I think
like Sisyphus,
that we'll really see a difference when the heads of departments are themselves engaged in the process of cultural competence and demonstrate that commitment that diversity is our strength, and that we really are committed to this, and it does make a difference by participating in the process, by being at the meetings. I mean, they go to budget meetings, and they go to, junior league or wherever it is they go to, get the support of the community. But in order to engage with us, there needs to be folks at the top who see the need and are modeling it, walking the walk and talking the talk, and in that their employees, the folks at the bottom, will feel empowered and will join with them, and I think you'll see a big shift and a big change.
Yeah.
And I think that commitment to diversity is shown when you look at what does the staff look like. And when you have hiring opportunities, who are you hiring, all things being equal? When you have staff of color or staff with language abilities that you need, do you value that? And how do you demonstrate that you value that? Do they get paid for that? Do they get compensated in some way? Are they supported? That's where we're going to see the shift and the change, and that's what's really needed.
Yeah.
And,
do you value the skill set, and is the skill set compensated?
Right.
And do you also give access to other people to acquire the skill set?
Well, and I think that when we talk about skill sets, do you have any of the skill sets necessary to show the leadership? What commitment have you had? I mean, in the years that I worked at the department, I served on the Federal Commission on Human Rights. I think that folks need to show some kind of commitment besides showing up at a particular event or
First Friday or whatever.
Fundraising, Juneteenth, whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever. NAACP dinner.
But are you integrated into the community, and is that something outside your regular community? Do you feel as comfortable coming to African American, Latino events, Asian, LGBT groups, PFLAG, whatever? What are you aware of? What do you participate in that would reflect something that's gaining your cultural competence and awareness of what's needed in this community and working with different populations? Are you able to do it? Or do you need some training in that area? Do you need some competence?
Yeah. Because even when there's some compatibility within, for example, if one of the things we had dealt with, like with our Rites of Passage program, where we, well, what about Anglo people? What about Anglo Rites of Passage? Okay, y'all write the curriculum like we had to study and research and write the curriculum. Oh, what about gay and lesbian rights of? Okay. Y'all want to do that, then what you need to do is, like we have done, not only look at what white gays and lesbians are dealing with, not just those kids, but the communities of color that each have, a gay and lesbian population that may or may not be an acceptance in that community. Do you know them? And by the way, how are you treating gays and lesbians of color if you're a lesbian, if you're a white lesbian, or a white gay man? Because often one of the dangers that we found in playing the diversity game is that GLBT folks do have a legitimate seat at the diversity table. No question about that.
Sure.
Okay? But white privilege combined with that makes them gatekeepers to keep the rest of us out.
Well.
And so, all right, are you welcoming to Latinas, lesbian Latinas? Are you as down with them for their cause and their struggle as we are for gay marriage or whatever?
Right.
Are you?
Well, I think anytime we see oppression,
right,
other people being kept down, all of us, have a voice. And I think that one of the things I learned a lot about working with folks at the department is the importance of allies.
Yes.
And it's through our allies, the white folks who believe in what it is that we're talking about, who may not have experienced the discrimination but believe it and know it, or maybe have experienced it through a child. They may have a biracial child or family members or whatever it is that heightens that awareness, where they're aware of that splinter and how it got there and what could be done to stop that from occurring again. I think that we really need to have folks have come on board for us the way we've come on board for them. Right. We've welcomed oppressed people, example, the gay and lesbian community, as people who have experienced discrimination, and let's work together. On the other hand, I think we need to have all the folks unite with us too and say, I've seen and I've experienced, and I know my friend has experienced this, and it's not okay with me.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago talking to Steve Carmichael about, one of my beefs, and I remember he got kind of huffy with me and said something like, well, Bibi, I really resent that, and, because I was saying that, I felt like that was a discriminatory practice, that felt like discrimination. And, whew, he didn't like it at the time, but I looked at him and said, Steve, I can tell you what discrimination feels like because I'm feeling it, I'm experiencing it, and I'm not going to allow you to negate my experience. I'm telling you, honestly, this is what's happening and it hurts. You can choose to believe me or not. And eventually he came around and said, okay, Bibi, I see what you were talking about. At first I felt kind of like, wait a minute, you were attacking me.
Yeah.
I said, well, sometimes when we get hurt enough, we do become kind of you know, and I don't mean it in terms of attacking you. I'm attacking that belief system. I'm attacking that value that isn't working for me. And so I think that having folks who are willing to listen and hear and do something about it, it's not just same old stuff, different day.
I think it's a learning piece for them. I mean, specifically Anglos, right? Intensity of feeling is not an attack. We're just feeling it intensely. It hurts, and a reaction to hurt is anger. The anger is not at you. It hurts. So I'm just saying, look, it hurts. I'm not blaming you. It hurts. So I just want you to hear that. It's not an attack. Because the other piece of that, where you get threatened, I'm not attacking you. So where you might be getting threatened actually is that you've gotten hurt too. And I'm not saying or negating that you weren't. Right. But you've gotten hurt too, and and you've forgotten it. It's a splinter whose pain you've forgotten. Because sooner or later, we've all done, Indians haven't tried to conquer the world. But sooner or later, many of us have enslaved other folks and tried our bit at world conquering, over the last 10,000 years, white folks, it got done to you. You're Irish, you got treated like the Indians were by the English. You've forgotten that, some of you, not all of you. Carmichael, is okay. It's Irish, Scotch-Irish, so maybe you're not in touch with that, or maybe that is, I like him.
I have a lot. He earned my respect.
Yeah, and, mine too.
And that was, that was a process. It was mutual. Yeah. And the communication was honest and upfront, and I appreciated that. And I think that's what's important, is that we have people in leadership positions who are able to speak honestly, listen with open ears, and act with integrity. Yeah. And as community leaders and representatives, we're watching to see how is it that your actions are helping all people, because justice for some isn't justice, it's justice for all. Right. And whether you're poor, you're brown, you're black, we should all have access, and that should be reflected in the services. It should be reflected in who's providing the services. You can't get very far if you can't understand what someone's saying. Yeah. And you don't know the culture. And you have the capability of learning. So when we have, in the last, say, few minutes that we have, I guess the piece that I'd like to see, and you can comment on this, is like, all right, I'd like to have an immigration policy that's non-racist, that basically if we're going to talk about kicking people out, we kick the illegal white people out too, or they can have the amnesty process, or we can learn their language as well as they learn ours, so that we get to a place where, as an African, what I see, these folks are going north to escape slavery. And poverty and oppression. And poverty and oppression, just like black people were trying to go to Canada to escape slavery. I see it exactly the same way. Well, and I see it as it's a finite world. Right. And so I'm against kicking anybody out. Yeah. I think that our resources are diminishing, and we need to be open to all people. of course, you know, people
Especially
say, do
if
you
they're
think you
coming
feel
to
that way
help
because
us
you're
out? Yeah.
Latina? Maybe.
Right.
That's part of my culture. Mi
Yeah.
casa es su casa.
Yeah,
My home
right,
is your home.
right.
And it isn't my, you know, a man's home is his castle. We're
Right.
not castle people. We're casas, little houses. And it's a little world, and there's a lot of us to fit here. And in order to fit well, we have to know who we're dealing with and how to deal with them, how to treat people well, all
Yeah.
people.
And, you know, maybe it's just a black thing, but, you know, it wasn't an immigrant from Mexico that killed Bill Cosby's son. It was a Russian who said, oh, I killed a nigger. So he's an immigrant. Where did he get that racist attitude? In Russia or here? And was he here legally or not? So when we look at that question of, no, I want to assist people that are here to help us build this country. And these folks are doing that.
And we're on that building block, I hope.
Yeah.
We're moving in
Yeah.
that direction.
I hope so. I hope so. So, final thoughts?
Okay. Well, I think that diversity is a strength, and I hope that it continues to be at the forefront of a lot of what we do, because we aren't all the same.
You know, with your years of experience with the department, I would really hope that they consult with you on some of their recent and many of their future doings, because
I'm retired. I'm at home.
yeah, they know your number.
Sure.
And we know theirs. So, okay.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
So, if you've liked what you've seen, send feedback. I've gotten great feedback, and I actually might even invite the people that send us stuff, you know, for future shows. So, tell a friend. You can send feedback to liveclass@lanecc.edu. This has been DiversiTV. I'm Mark Harris. Thank you for watching.